Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast. My name is Marcy Nettles, and I am your host. And I am so blessed and honored to be able to be back with you again with another episode highlighting a breakdown to breakthrough story. We know that many people feel stuck and not quite sure how to be able to break through out of their hard times into what the future could potentially have for them. So I love being able to spotlight amazing guests that have had those opportunities to choose, because it really does come down to a decision on either to stay where they're at, stay stuck in that breakdown, or to move forward and do the uncomfortable to break through. So our guest today is, an amazing example of this. He's had some great experiences. His name is Blaine Oelkers. He is a TEDx speaker and leading authority in personal implementation and consistency. He is America's only chief results officer. He's a habit master with a documented streak of 1,568 days in a row and counting. That is amazing. As a top LinkedIn connector, he has over 25,000 first-level connections. Blaine graduated from Purdue University and Stanford University's social entrepreneurship program. He's been a work-from-home dad for the past 27 years. He is powered by Selfluence, a personal development and training company. He is excited to share with you ways that you can take control of your life by taking control of yourself. So I am so honored and excited to be able to welcome Blaine to the show. Hey, Blaine, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Marcy, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I just want to say thank you for putting this podcast together and helping people, kind of being a little bit of a beacon of light there. So many people are going through so many tough things, but to know and for you to showcase some of these transformations is fantastic. And I hope people will see a little bit of themselves in some of the stories we share today, and that they'll have a little bit of a transformation today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's truly a journey, correct? It's not you're there and then all of a sudden you're where you want to be. This is a progression of your life. And to be able to recognize every step along the way that there are small victories that we can really celebrate, I think that's what will really help people and shine the light on the path out of the darkness into the light. So thank you.
I couldn't agree more. And what's interesting is, you can't change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction. And so often I talk about, like, it's going from point A to point B, and you can't just magically get to point B instantly. But what you can do instantly, and a lot of times you teach this through making a decision. I sometimes call it a clarifying decision, but you can make a decision and you can change your direction. So you're headed and you're pointed in the right direction, and then move towards that destination. But it is a journey. And once you figure out kind of where you want to go, then it's kind of enjoying the progress along the way. And that, to me, actually, in the end, to me, that's what success is. It's like you moving towards whatever it is that you want. It's a very personal thing, but wherever you want to go, if you're moving towards that, I think you're a success.
Amen. I agree with you 100%. So getting into the personal side of Blaine a little bit here. First of all, the title of your show is You're a Dad That Wants to Parent. What now? That is such a huge thing, because there is such a pressure put on parents, especially fathers, to be gone and outside of the home, to be able to support their families and to live up to a certain standard that society has put on us. That a lot of the times the fathers are gone and absent from children's lives. Can you share with the What Now Tribe, a little bit more about who you are and what life was like for you as a child?
Yeah. For me, when I think back, in my situation, both my parents worked. And so typically, as a younger child, I found myself in one of two situations. One was that I couldn't go home. And so after school, because no one was there, I had to go to the library. And so basically I had to walk from school to this old library. I went back to see it. It wasn't as scary when I went back as an adult. When I was a kid, it was this old kind of castle looking, it was a little scary to me back then, library. And there I would wait for one of my parents to finish work and then come pick me up. So that was option one. And then option two was that I would go home, and sometimes my brother was there. He was 3 years older, but many times he wasn't there. So I would come in and I'd be alone. And again, in thinking back, it was a little scary. And, listen, there are many people where both parents have to work. And I came to, my parents both love me, and I grew up with a lot of love, surrounding me. And everyone's situation is different, but understanding that ended up kind of shaping my life later. When I became a father, so some of these experiences of being a little bit alone as a child kind of helped to shape me, and I think created a little bit of a better life for my own kids.
Yeah, well, you could see the difference. You could see what you had experienced and maybe what you wish you would have experienced. And, there's a whole generation of people, and I would say it's even multiple generations, that have been titled latchkey kids for a reason. It's because they do have that key around their neck, and they're going home either to an empty house or with a sibling going home to an empty house. And it's not because they don't have good relationships with their parents and they don't love their parents and their parents don't love them. It's just that the parents are trying to provide and they only know one way. Can you share a little bit deeper into those times? I mean, I love your example of that library being kind of scary, like this big castle, and you had to go and sit there by yourself. I mean, how old were you when this was going on? And can you dive a little bit deeper into some of those experiences that might have created a little bit of fear in the young Blaine?
Yes, yes. So young Blaine, this was, we actually had moved. And so it was a little bit of a shock because we actually used to live with my mom's parents in a 2-story, right? So that was, you come home to mayhem. There's always people there, and the grandparents are typically always there, and they were on the bottom floor and we lived on the top floor. And so we went from that environment, and it was, for me, it was it was the 4th and 5th and 6th grades. And then my brother was in this like pre-high school that started in the 7th grade. So he was at a totally different school. So for me, those kind of initial scary years was the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And also we went from like my brother and I being at the same school. So even if we walked home or whatever, like somebody was always there. Like I was always with him, right? To kind of this aloneness. So that made it a little scarier. And when I think back, I can like physically feel fear if I try to put myself, back in that situation. And that's why when I went back, Morristown, New Jersey is where I grew up. When I went back there, I went back to that library and it was still there. And I'm like, man, this library is small and it's not that scary. But back then it was.
Well, when you're only 4th, 5th, or 6th grade, that's like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I mean, you're small, you're young. And it probably, right. And we always make things bigger in our own minds too. We blow them up big time, right?
Right.
And then you also had this whole dynamic with your brother being that 3 years older. He's now a little bit more mature. He's moved probably more into puberty and choosing other friends and not necessarily wanting little brother hanging around all the time.
This is true. And he was in a high school that started at 7th grade, not 9th grade. And so now once I caught up to that and I went to the 7th grade, then I started going to that high school and it was better, and my friend groups expanded, and I was in that same high school from 7 to 12. So, and it was a small, I think we had 72 graduates in our class. So it was a little bit small, tight knit, kind of still friends with a lot of those people on Facebook and stuff like that. So once I got to that point, it was better. But those early memories, they have an effect, and everybody has that, typically kind of maybe the good and the bad memories, but everybody has those memories, from the past. And sometimes, you do need to revisit those. And then other times you might have to revisit them and maybe shift them in some way. So a lot of times I talk with people about hacking their own head trash. How do you hack your head trash if it's not serving you, well? So for me though, yeah, that played a role. That fear played a big role. And then I actually lost my dad suddenly, unexpectedly, to something called sudden death heart attack. So that's you have a heart attack the first time, you don't even know you have heart disease, and you pass away. And that actually happened on the day that my son was born. Now, luckily, I had talked with my dad and he was like excited and, first grandchild and all this stuff. And he was so excited about that. But then, yeah, then that night, I lost him. And that, I think that was even more traumatic, than the coming home to the empty home, was losing like my cheerleader, my number one cheerleader person, kind of my go-to guy, and losing him in an instant, and I remember my stepmom calling me, and I could just tell from her voice like something was really wrong, and then she told me, and I just like kind of broke down. And I cry more today than I did back then, but I wasn't, and I still am not a big crier. But man, that I can remember I was in the hospital where our son was just born with my wife Beth, and I remember kind of like shrinking into the bathroom, by myself, and just kind of weeping out, on that hospital floor. I actually have a picture of our son, and he's smiling and he's just being born, in that hospital room. But I can still, that still kind of it gives me chills to think about that. But that really hurt, and probably hurt more than nearly anything else that I've experienced. And I had this. It took a long time, but I had this transition of, was I going to be, better or bitter, and making that choice was difficult. That Christmas, that first Christmas, because this was in November, that first Christmas was probably the worst Christmas I had ever had. And you just don't know what to do. And my wife was beside herself, and then she just had this new baby, so she couldn't do anything. She had to stay with the baby. We were living in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I went back to New Jersey. I kind of had to bury my father without her, and she's like my companion and my soulmate, and I couldn't really be with her either. So it was rough, but I, and we can talk about some of that, but the initial stage of that is bitter anger, all those stages of grief.
Oh my gosh, yes. So there's so much we can dive into here. And I resonate so much with your story. I actually lost my mother when I was 7 months pregnant with my first child.
Oh,
And so I
oh,
completely understand all of these different things that you are sharing with us right now. And we'll get deeper into that. But one of the things that you said that I really want to make a point of pointing maybe a little bit more of a light on, because I think it's what most people really need to address, is way too many of us allow things that occurred in our past to dictate what's going on now and will happen in the future. Where if we go and relook at it in our adult eyes and really evaluate the truth of it, and not just the stories that we've made up around it throughout time, it's the perfect example you gave there was, when you were young, that library was huge and it was so scary and intimidating. And yet when you went back and you evaluated it and you created the truth around the situation, that really it was just a small building that just happened to
Right.
house some of your experiences.
Yes, such a good point. And know that, you can replay the movie in your mind and look for what are the learnings, right? Like I like the past to be instructive, right? What can I learn from here? How can I do better? And you can replay those movies. And typically, if you do replay those in that light, shining the adult light, like you said, on it, it comes out to be something of value, right? And then something that ends up shaping you. Right. And so later for me, this aloneness, that time, that those things that happened to me ended up shaping a decision that I made, a little bit later, which we could unpack too. I have these moments of dawning comprehension, which lead to a big clarifying decision. But when my son was 1 year old, I came back from a business trip, and my son was kind of like giving me the cold shoulder. And I'm like, "Hey, Beth, what's going on with Bo? What's wrong?" He's like, "Well, you were gone so long, he kind of forgot who you were." And I'm like, whoa, that's when it all that childhood stuff came back to me in that moment. And that night, I kind of made an emotional decision that I was going to work from home. Now, it took me a year and probably pushed our marriage to the brink, because I started two businesses and kept my full-time job. And my wife was then pregnant with our second, anyway, wild times. But we made it through all that. And a year later, I broke free. And that, like you said in my introduction, that was 27 years ago. Now the kids have flown the nest. But I was able to be that kind of work from home dad. And we had to have a lot of ground rules, and there was all kinds of a little bit of mayhem here and there. But then, I could be there. And probably that hit me so hard because of my experiences. And a lot of times that's the expression of our life, is that collection of experiences that we had, so.
And that can be good, bad, and ugly experiences, right?
Right, correct, right.
And it comes down to that decision again, the clarifying decision that you like to use, the clarifying aspect of that, of are we going to use those past experiences as control factors that keep us down and away from what we can potentially have? Or are we going to learn from them, grow from them, and let them empower us into stepping outside of the comfort zone, which is exactly what you did when you made your clarifying decision, that you did not want to have your children experience some of the things that you experienced. And, I think it was a total gift. I think it was a gift given to you when you came home that trip and your son reacted that way, because it gave you that opportunity to make this clarifying decision.
Yeah, in hindsight, yes, it was a little crazy and emotional at the time, but in hindsight, yes, it was that gift. And it ended up, I kind of did it like in honor of my father. Like I knew that my son wasn't going to have that grandfather at all, right? So I kind of almost made it in honor of my dad. And I was still, kind of grieving that. It takes a while, and I had this choice, like, was I going to be better or bitter? Was it going to make me better, or was I going to leave myself in that bitterness? And what I realized, I had read this book, Think and Grow Rich, a long time ago, and I had this little saying, what you think about, you bring about. And I realized that was the key, that if whatever I focused on was going to expand. So if I focused on the gifts and that my parents and my dad had given me, and what would he want me to do, then that would expand. And if I focused on, why me, and a little bit more of the victim side of things, then that was going to grow. And when I realized that and had that realization, almost a moment of dawning comprehension, then that helped me to move forward. And I knew that that's, what my dad wanted, and wherever he was, I think he's in heaven, but wherever he is, he was kind of cheering me on to do that, and to really, show up, for the family at that higher level, because we were going to be missing, his physical presence.
Yes, absolutely. I love that, bitter or better. And it's also, grief is a very interesting thing. Grief is an animal. And if you don't know how to tame it, because it never goes away, you want to make friends with it, because grief is something that you will feel. I mean, it's been 30 years since I lost my mother, and I still grieve her to this day. Some days it's much easier and it doesn't come up very often, but other times I weep because I am correlating the missed opportunities. And so, like you said, if we focus on the missed opportunities of our parents not being here to see, be, and do who we wish they could be with our kids, then we miss out on honoring them the proper way. And that's what you're doing. I love that so very much.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point on the grief. It's something that never goes away, and you could be fine and you get hit by the wave of grief, and all of a sudden people just wonder, why is he crying in the corner over there or whatever, I mean, it can just hit you, and so, but that's okay. It's there because it has a meaning. It has a message. It's a gift. and you profess, what science likes to call the growth mindset kind of versus the fixed mindset, right? And when you have that, that makes all the difference, right? When you're taking responsibility and you realize that, yes, you can grow from it, this thing can be a gift, versus people that have a fixed mindset, like, no, that's the way it is, it'll never change, and those things are going to hold you back. They're going to keep you down. And so having that, looking for the gifts in whatever happens is really the key. My favorite mentor, who I shared the stage with a couple times, Jim Rohn. He was the guy that kind of shaped my life in outside of my dad. So once my dad left, then I actually got to meet Jim Rohn, and he became a mentor. And he always talked about, it's not what happens that determines your life future. It's what you do about what happens. And when I realized that too, that was a realization that circumstances are going to happen to everybody, good, bad, but it's what you do about those things. That's what determines where you end up in life, not all the circumstances of life and the good and the bad and the pandemics and all that stuff. That's going to happen. And when something really bad happens, like a pandemic, it's happening to everybody. So we're kind of all in the same boat. But again, what you do with it, that makes the difference.
Yes. Okay. So this is one of those moments. If you're listening and you're part of the What Now tribe, this would be a great point to just go and rewind a little bit and listen to that again and again and again, because that right there can get you out of any difficult situation that you are in, is by changing your mindset, changing your perspective around the things that you might be in the middle of now that are really uncomfortable. And we are not diminishing the difficulty that you're going through, but we are hoping to empower you with a different way of looking at it. So, okay, back to the regularly scheduled program here with Blaine. So I would love for you to dive a little bit deeper into the type of relationship that you did have with your father when you were a child, what kind of a dad he was, and was it everything that you wished it would have been?
Yeah, I think with my dad, he was, kind of a mechanical engineer was his degree. And the cool thing is he worked in New York City. So, and he would take the train in from New Jersey, and I got to go with him on a number of occasions. And he early on, he showed me, automation and computers, and I really, kind of had a liking or a taking to that. And so he did help me kind of with that first career. And my mom actually got me my first job as a software engineer person for a company that she knew the owner of. So my parents both were kind of, very helpful people. They did work a lot, right? So they had their careers, but I never felt, unloved. But it was a busy household, and I have all pretty generalized good feelings and good relationships. I could talk to my dad and tell him anything. What was interesting, as I grew up though, and then went away to college and those kinds of things, we didn't really have we didn't have cell phones and things like that, back in the, early 80s when I went to college, so it was like trying to schedule the Sunday afternoon phone call to try to talk to dad and things like that. So I kind of wish for maybe a little bit more of a connection, and I cherish the connection that I can have with my kids. I talk to my son every week. He lives in Denmark, but no problem, easy to FaceTime or chat. And so I think we're kind of a little spoiled in today's world with everything. But my parents gave me a good base to build from, and I kind of cherish and all that. And then, like I said, he went very quickly. And so there's pros and cons to that. My wife's dad, who was the opposite of that, he actually had leukemia, and it was a very long process, which was good from a say goodbye standpoint, get everything organized and all that, but it was also like a lot more painful because it was over a number of months. So anyway, again, like you, I'm kind of looking for what can I learn from that. When what I look for, I find.
Yes.
And so I typically tend to look for the good. And for me, I think that's what science is proving now, is that it is the lens by which you look at life ends up dictating the reality that you experience, which is kind of bizarre, but an example that I often give is that, if I said, okay, Marcy, today's going to be like a really bad day, really, really bad day for you. I'm sorry to tell you that. And then you're almost hit by a car and they say, oh, Blaine was right. I was almost hit by the car, and you will be shaking. You'll be like, what's bad is going to happen next? And you'll physically have these symptoms of fear and dread. Now, in that same morning, if I said, Marcy, I don't know why, but today's going to be extra special, maybe one of the best days of your freaking life. And you go out and the same thing happens. You're almost hit by the car. But this time now, there's everybody some adrenaline when they hit the brakes and you're almost hit. But right after that, you're going to be a totally different person. You're going to be like, wait a second, God's got a reason for me. I'm still here. My life is spared. This is the best day of my life. The whole turn over a new leaf, and you're going to be excited and happy and all that. And the same things happen. The only difference was the lens through which you looked at it. And physically, neurons and brain chemicals and all that stuff is influenced by your outlook to it. So science is kind of backing all that stuff up, but that to me is exciting, but also very scary if you're not taking control of that, or if your lens is dirty, or you're just watching the news all the time, which is so negative that your lens can get cloudy very quickly.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is just a perfect story to just reiterate, put that exclamation point on. What you focus on is what you get, right? You get more of the things that you focus on. And I love that example of either you're going to have the best day or the worst day, and going into it, basically after you almost got hit by that car, you're grateful instead of having the fear, right? And when you're grateful,
Right.
there's different endorphins and happy hormones and different things that come about that create even more health and wellness inside of your body. So I love this conversation. Everybody, take this serious, because it truly is your get out of jail free card, right? Is your mindset and your
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. And it's so important that how you see it ends up dictating the emotions that are generated, the brain chemicals, and life is kind of this battle of the brain chemicals, but emotionally and your thoughts are dictated by that lens, by that intention, for the day. My wife puts up, we have in the bathroom, this is a good day for a good day. And we're always kind of, that's our thing that we always, say, and not every day is the best day, but when you're looking for it, you find it. And if you're not looking for it, you never find it. So that's why one of the most unfortunate things I find is that a lot of people are walking around with what I call the pre-defeated mind. Like they're already done. Oh, I can't do this. I can't do that. I could never do this. Like you said, step out of your comfort zone, right? I heard a great quote. It was, when you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them, right? So when you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. And that's that pre-defeated mind, because you're never even going to step out to do anything if you think you can, right? And if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, Henry Ford. But this idea of, it has to start there. It has to start with you and your thoughts. Now, a lot of people will say, I've got so much head trash, Blaine, I can't do it. I can't do it. And when someone says that, I try to get them to realize that the solution to pollution is dilution. Right? The solution to pollution is dilution. So in science class, when you had the beaker of dark water and you add the clear water to it, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. If you add enough clear water, it becomes clear again. Well, it's the same thing with the head trash that I don't know what the ratio is for you, but for me, it's like 5-1. If I have 1 hour of pity party or negative thoughts or grief or whatever, I need like 5 hours I got to pour in the positive to kind of dilute that pollution. So for me, I will use audio programs, podcasts like this one, right? This is very high energy frequency wise, but you surround yourself, you pour in the good stuff, right? Finding mentors. The people, if you hang around them, they bring you down, and people you hang around and they lift you up, right? So being by those high energy, high frequency foods, high frequency activities. If you dance to your favorite 80s thing, that's my music, but if I run around and dance to that, I'm in a better mood, right? So you can figure out what those personal lifters are. But remember, solution to pollution is dilution. And sometimes you really got to pour a lot of positive in to kind of flip the switch. But once you flip it and you start winning the battle of the brain chemicals, then, look out, because you're going to be unstoppable.
Amazing. That was so good. That was like mic drop. I'm going to go back and listen to this myself several times. So when I asked the question about your relationship with your dad, I knew you had a great relationship with your dad. I just know it was cut a little bit short. And yet, I know that when you were a child, you probably wish that you would have had more time with him. And I think that that's something that every child, especially from certain generations, we look back on that and we're like, hmm, what if, right? What if I had had more time? So, as you've gone through this journey called Blaine's life and all of this awareness that you have come to, do you believe that you have learned what kids truly want from their parents?
Well, I think you just hit the number one thing, right? Which is time. And that's what I decided that, I wanted to give to my kids. And maybe I gave them even too much time. Like, dad's everywhere. But time is probably one of the biggest things, is time. And at the end of life, most people say, I wish I had more memorable moments with the people I love. And that's really it, memorable moments. And it's funny what the kids, when I ask them, what they remember the most. And, yeah, sometimes it's like the big vacation. We stay 2 weeks in Hawaii and the house on the beach. Yes, they remember that. But mostly they remember the smaller things, right? Making the fort out of the boxes. Or we had like a ball pit and then we played in the pool with these balls for hours. Or we played basketball in the pool, just these kind of simple things. But it was that time together, or game night. Our family's big kind of game people, but it's those simple, small things that typically is just time, right? And so I think that's number one is now if you're limited on time, give quality time as best you can, right? As best you can. And now today, as a parent, the tools that we have, unbelievable. We never had this. When I was a first parent, I couldn't just like text my kids instantly anytime, and I'm thinking of you, hope you're having a good day. Boom, that takes 3 seconds, right? The connectivity with our kids is so much higher than it ever has been. So that's really, cool. And then unique experiences that don't have to take a whole lot of time. Like the best thing that we've done in the last few months with our family was that my son bought us a make pasta with an Italian grandmother over Zoom, right? So here's the Italian grandmother. She's in Italy, and she speaks only Italian, but her granddaughter is there. She speaks English, and we make a homemade gnocchi together, and then we leave that Zoom and we start our own Zoom and we eat it together. And we have this great meal together. Just a couple of hours, and a beautiful time that you're going to remember forever. So magical, memorable moments and time, I think are the big thing. The second thing I would say, though, is that they need identity, right? And they, you have to give them enough experiences for them to find some type of identity for themselves that's not you. That's not part of like I would push my own identity, and I did push my kids a little bit like into tennis and some other sports that was a little bit more like my favorite sport, but they need to find their identity, and you need to help them, but then it's really more of a support. Like they have to discover some of that stuff, on their own, and being supportive and being open. I think that's big. So let them try different things, but when they like something, really help them to kind of pour into that so they can find their identity, find their kind of uniqueness in this world. And then the third one I'll say is my biggest mistake. So a lot of times people say, hey, Mr. Work from Home Dad, blah, 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 what's your biggest mistake? And my biggest mistake was not letting the kids see the failures, see the mistakes. So, we didn't make a lot of mistakes, my wife and I, but when we did, we never talked about it. Right. And so it was, we just handled it. They never saw it. And we missed the opportunity to, let them learn from those mistakes. But in the end, I mean, we probably made up for it. Like both my kids did tennis in high school, and they learned a lot from playing those sports and losing. You want to win more than you lose, but there are other ways they learned, that losing is when you learn, right? I mean, like in tennis, they'd win like 10 matches in a row, and then they'd be like, Dad, why are you putting me in that tournament? I'm going to get zonked. And it's like, no, that's right, because you're not learning anything. If you're winning all the time, you're not learning. The losing is where you learn the most. It's the grief that teaches you the most, not the great the great win, so anyway, long story short is, let them see, let them see the mistakes, let them see the losses, and let them, watch you rebound from those. We probably sheltered our kids too much from those.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with you 100%. They need to see that failing forward is learning, right? And it's an opportunity. If you stay in the same spot and focus on the failure, then that is the failure, right? So just to recap that, time, quality time, connecting with unique experiences. I love that example of learning how to do pasta with an authentic Italian grandma. Such a
And
great.
anybody, I'm not plugging them, but anyone can do that. It's on Airbnb online experiences, and it's
Yes.
they have a super business set up, and it's very well done.
Oh my gosh, how fun is that? Seriously. And then letting your child have their own identity, not thinking that they have to just do what you did or what you think they should be doing, but let them become themselves. Such a good point there. And then 3, letting your kids see your failures and your mistakes. Don D and I have been home-based parents as well for over a decade now. We have a blended family, and our younger kids are 13 and 16. And I would say that we have probably done the same thing in keeping the kids from the difficulties and the failures, and just, being able to experience things with them. Although he did experience being kicked out of our daughter's room because he was in there too much playing Barbies with her when she was younger. So he's had that experience too. But what a beautiful experience to have, to be kicked out because you're there too much.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, well said. And I think that when you have more than one child too, that identity thing is helping them discover their own identities, different from each other. Our daughter is younger by 19 months, and she followed in our son's footsteps a little bit. But as soon as she started to develop her own identity, then we tried to pour into that. So my son's identity actually ended up coming from iPhones. And when the iPhone came out, he loved it, and he really got into it, and ended up that was what he wanted to do, was to like program iPhones. And so he went to college at Cal Poly, and he ended up going to Apple and working at Apple for 5 years doing that, right? So his identity became that, and it manifested. And then our daughter, she got interested in medicine because she had a job. We helped her get a summer job with a friend at an infertility clinic. And it was there that summer she made this clarifying decision. I think I want to go to med school and be a doctor and all that. So then her whole life, got very laser focused, but she did that, and she made it, and she became a medical doctor. And now she's in her second year of residency right now, local here to where we are in Phoenix. But anyway, it's that identity. And then when they find it, really help them, embrace it and move forward in it.
Yeah, and give them maybe the opportunity to open up their vision and their goals or passion into what a future career doing those things that they enjoy could look like. I mean, it's like,
Exactly.
I know that there's been situations where we've, maybe our son's on video games a little bit too much, and we're like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Right. But then maybe looking at it a little bit different with a different perspective. That what is it that really draws you to this? What are you enjoying? What do you think you could do with this as a career? And just helping mold their thought process around their passions. I love that. Such a great idea.
Yeah. And if they like the video games, our son was into the video games, and he ended up going to like this 2-week school where you build your own video game. And like, we just tried to find different things that pulled it kind of up out of just the game playing, into what could you do with that, right? And so you can find these little camps. I think it was called iTech camps. So he ended up going to that a couple of summers, and really enjoyed it, and then would come home and say, here, play this game that I built. And, so it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That is so good. So we've talked a lot about your life, about your childhood, and how, a lot of things seemed big and scary when you were younger, and then progressing through and growing into someone that was a little bit easier and able to handle the latchkey situation. But then losing your dad, and then grief comes into it. And I think that that's a point that people need to understand, that grief can really put you into a situation to where, if you're not careful, you let it dictate what your life can be like. And there's a lot of great ways and places that you can go for support for grief. My husband and I are actually facilitators for a grief share group at our church.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
And one of the most important things for people to understand is that grief is its own individual animal for each person, and that your grief will look different than anybody else's. And so making sure that you just embrace your grief, you need to feel the pain, because if you don't address it and heal from the pain, then you close yourself off to the memories of the person that you love and you care about. Because if you start to think about them, then you start to feel the pain. And if you don't want to feel the pain, you just don't think about them. It's a whole cycle
Yeah, you can get in a
there.
vicious cycle there. That's yeah, well said. And yeah, getting help. I mean, the church is a great place to start to get help. And I also, what I like about today's world is that help has never been so close. And what I mean by that is that there are companies like Talkspace and these other companies that you can talk to a counselor, and I recently did that myself, and my insurance paid for it. It was like, it was fantastic, and it's all confidential and nobody has to know about it. But help is very, very close. So don't, reach out. And sometimes it's just, you might just need a good friend. But also, I think most churches have programs to help, right? And then even beyond that, you can talk to professional counselors. So yeah, get the help you need, especially if you feel like you're stuck and it feels heavy, so heavy that you can't, get out of it yourself. Really, seek help, and it never hurts.
Yeah, well, and that's a circumstance that you can truly get stuck in grief. And then that's the only thing you can focus on. And then you're in that negative space a lot of the time that doesn't let you progress forward. So, yes, absolutely. So, what is one thing that you wish that you could go back and share with Latchkey Blaine that, maybe you didn't know back then, that you would like to share with yourself now?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was talking to myself, I would say, be less fearful. And the world isn't as scary as it may seem to you right now. It'll get better. I think that was, a lot of stuff I probably was kind of making up in my own head. So maybe, calm down a little bit. And then also, at that point in my life, our family, I was brought up Catholic, so we had some inkling of the church, but also leaning into God more. I would probably try to have myself do that. And my life got better, the more I leaned into the spiritual side of who I was. And so I would probably try to give my younger self some advice like that.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think that right now that is going to be a key bit of information for parents that are listening to this that have younger children, that you can share that with them as well. Because in this time, this day and age, our youth are struggling and they are suffering from so many different things. The past 2.5 years have separated them from friends, is created rifts in identity. It has created restrictions in thought processes and even schooling. And unfortunately, suicide has become the second most, or highest cause of death in the youth in ages 14 to 23. If they could just hear that message, that don't be
Yeah.
afraid, that things will get better, lean in because God is always there for you. You're never alone. And there is a future that is bright for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
and keep talking, keep talking. If you're the parents, of those aged kids, keep talking to them, keep talking to them, lean into them and let them know that you're there. And if you are one of those kids, keep talking, whether it's to your friends, whether it's to your parents, whether it's to a guidance counselor, whoever, but keep talking. That's probably one of the biggest things you can do, because then you're going to see any kind of signs that might be heading in the wrong direction.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So I know you've already given us, the three things that you think kids want the most from their parents and how we can be better parents, which there's no book for this thing, right? And so it's nice
Right.
to get tips and tricks every once in a while on how to be a better parent. But what type of tips would you like to give to the What Now tribe on how they can make different decisions, maybe clarifying decisions, and be able to take control of themselves and their lives?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I'm on the planet to help people take control of their lives, by taking control of themselves, right? And so for me, I think that does start with this concept of Waiteba. What you think about, you bring about. And if you can change the thoughts, which is really just changing the lens by which you look at life, if you can do that, I believe that your life will begin to change. Now, that's not always easy. If you're full of head trash, then you're going to have to start pouring in the positive. You're going to have to find some mentors. You have to find podcasts like this one to where, you're pouring in more of the good stuff to dilute, right? To dilute the pollution down. You got to pour in the positive. So get around, those things that are going to lift you up. And that, that can be through audio, that can be through video, and this sounds kind of simplistic, but this one guy, he said, do more of what works and less of what doesn't. And it sounds so simple, but if you would do that in your own life, and you can make a little list of what are the personal lifters, who are my friends that lift me up, and who are my friends that kind of tear me down or just are not positive to me, right? What are the foods you eat that make you feel better? What are the foods that you eat that make you feel terrible, right? And you have this list, and just do more of the good list and less of the bad list. It can be that simple to kind of turn things around for you, and get you kind of spiraling in a good direction. Now, sometimes it's easier to start with a decrease than an increase. So for example, if you can look like, what could you take out of your life to make more room for the positive stuff, and start with the decrease first. So a lot of times you make a decision about who you want to be, what you want, and then you start with the decrease, and then you go to the increase, the good stuff. But the decrease, what it is. So you, the listener, that there are things in your day. Let's just even just take just your daily day. There are things that you do that you could do less of, right? And so for me, it might be, I need a fast, what I call a media fast, right? It's too much social media, it's too much news media, it's too much getting distracted by the internet, by email, by other people's demands, by all the rings, dings, and bings. One of the best things I did for my own personal life was I turned off all the rings, dings, and bings on my phone. Now, my family, they're not that happy about it because my phone never rings. So they might try to reach me. And if I'm in the middle of some what I call single focus time, they wonder where I am. But outside of that, my life got a whole lot better. And when you set up boundaries, sooner or later, people will grow to respect those boundaries, right? And so people know that you can't call me on the phone. If we have a scheduled appointment, yes, then I answer the phone. But outside of that, I don't answer my phone. So anyway, there are some boundaries you can put together. But the main thing is kind of decide who you want to be, where you want to go, right? Maybe it's the 3 C's: clarity, create a plan, and carry it out, right? Clarity, create a plan, carry it out. And when you do that, look for what can you decrease, what can you take out of your life to make room for the good stuff, and then have that list of good stuff. And that good stuff might just be your favorite playlist that is going to bring you up. I have songs that can get me really motivated, but I also have, classical music and things that can kind of like calm me out if I need to work a little bit. But anyway, those would be some tips from your chief results officer.
I love it. That is perfect. I mean, and so simple as well. So guys, just go out and make your list. And then after you've made your list, make sure that you stick to them, make that clarifying decision. And clarifying in front of decision means that this is a decision you're going to stick to, right? This is something you're going to do, right? So Blaine, please share with us, how can the What Now Tribe follow the Chief Results Officer? How can they get in contact with you? How can they learn more from you?
Yeah. So I say America's only chief results officer. I work with a lot of mastermind groups, and they started calling me that because we get good results on a weekly basis. And I said, boy, that's an interesting name. And so I went to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and they granted me, the sole right. So I have the registered trademark, the R with the circle. So that's why I can say America's only chief results officer. Well, anyway, if you want to get a hold of me, the easiest way is just to go to BlaineTEDx.com. So BlaineTEDx.com. And there you can opt in. I did a TEDx talk. I'm a TEDx speaker. And I did this talk about Waiteba, what you think about, you bring about. And I actually kind of talk about my dad passing and the better, bitter or better. But then at the end of that, I show you a way to remind yourself of whatever you want to bring about in your life. but to remind yourself automatically like 60 to 100 times a day. So it's kind of an elegant mind hack. So anyway, that's in that TEDx talk, and it's so just go there. Then we'll be connected. You'll get to know me. You'll have my email, and if I can help you in any way, I'd love to do it.
Awesome. And is there any social media platforms you're on that they could watch, your positivity? I mean, we need to glean from the positive, right? And so is there anywhere that they can follow you?
Yes. So, LinkedIn, just looked up my name, Blaine Oelkers. Like you mentioned in my intro, I've got a big following there. Maybe some of my connections could help other people. I've got 25,000 or maybe it's 26,000 now, frontline connections there. So Blaine Oelkers on LinkedIn, Chief Results Officer. So Facebook.com/ I think it's Chief Results Officer, all one word. That is my kind of my business page about being the Chief Results Officer. And then, I'm also on social, on Facebook more. So I have an Instagram, but it just like pushes my Facebook over there. My kids tell me I need to do more there, but I haven't. So if someone is an Instagram marketing person, maybe I should talk to them too.
There you go. Would love to make connections all over the place. And I'm sure that you'll be able to connect me with more people that will be amazing interviews on this show. So your episode, you're a dad that wants to parent. What now? Blaine, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for being such an open guest with so much knowledge that you were willing to give out to this audience, because the What Now tribe is amazing and they just want better in their lives. And you just gave them some great places to start. So thank you so much for being my guest.
Oh, thank you for having me on. And I'll leave you with this. The bad news is time flies. The good news, you're the pilot. So pilot well, my friends.
Amen. Thank you, Blaine.